This is Lobby Concessionals, the movie podcast where nobody's right and everybody is wrong. That's Brendan. I'm Parker. I looked around on Reddit after
that time.
Oh yeah, after that first trailer for the Lord of the Rings Amazon show dropped.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and this time I actually have to give a little bit of context for this first person. Because someone says something and then the moron comes in, you know?
Well, I do love a good backstory.
Yeah. So the reasonable individual says about this trailer, this looked very clean and shiny. I fear it's going to be more the Hobbit trilogy than the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Okay.
Certainly not a challenger to early seasons Game of Thrones that I was hopeful it might be.
Right.
And then the moron comes in and says, there's no point comparing to Lord of the Rings. Nothing will ever come close to it again.
Lord of the Rings?
Yeah. Nothing. So, first question, I guess, is this a bad take?
So let me, so the original guy talks about a comparison to Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and then Game of Thrones.
Basically, he says, yeah, the show looks like it's going to be more The Hobbit than Lord of the Rings. But he had hoped that it would be
Game of Thronesy.
Game of Thronesy.
And then the idiot comes in and says to never ever describe anything like Lord of the Rings again.
Yeah, don't compare it to Lord of the Rings. Nothing will ever come close again.
So he effectively is saying, don't compare the Lord of the Rings show to the Lord of the Rings.
Correct.
I mean, I think we just answered our question.
So, like, for that reason, yes, definitely a bad take.
Yeah.
Obviously, the new show is going to be compared to the movie trilogy on some level. Now, granted, they're not the same time period.
No.
There's very few of the same characters. I believe it's just Galadriel
So far.
that we know of. Yeah. Actually, for context as well, I do not know when we're going to be releasing this episode, but it was filmed in July of 2022. So if we are morons and we release this after the show has come out, then we're going to really look stupid. But I don't think
we
we're
have
going to do
zero
that.
problems looking like idiots.
Yeah. So obviously, you have to compare these. Like, the properties are going to be the same. In the same way that The Hobbit was compared to
Absolutely.
the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So that's stupid in itself. But I think really the reason I pulled this off Reddit was that I think it's ridiculous to think that there is something that is so insurmountable as far as quality is concerned that nothing will ever even come. Like, we aren't allowed to compare to it because nothing's ever going to come close.
In all of space and time.
Yeah.
We can never compare to any movie ever to this standard.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
So, and I think some people think film reviewers and like film critics are like this with like Citizen Kane or something, where it's like, well, nothing's ever going to touch Citizen Kane, but that's ridiculous. And that's clearly blown out of proportion because the fact is there's lots of reviewers that think there are movies that are better than Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
There is typically a group of films that end up sort of, usually in sort of a top 10 list, kind of, like The Godfather, Part 1 and 2 are usually fairly high up on people's lists.
2001 is up there for a lot of people.
And then Citizen Kane as well. And so, oh my God. The fact that something can't be compared to is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And let's be very clear, I do think Lord of the Rings, the film trilogy, caught lightning in the bottle. I really think that
that's an interesting take.
I think that they pulled together the right people. They pulled together the right circumstances. Everything just worked out in an incredibly beneficial way as far as those films were concerned. My understanding is they spent the entire trilogy's worth of budget on the first movie. And then released it, and then Peter Jackson and the crew go back to New Line Cinema and said, "Yeah, but everyone loves it. You can pay us more now, right?" And so, like, some of that stuff I don't think would fly on a typical movie set, and they just happened to get lucky and got away with doing stuff like that. So I do think The Lord of the Rings is special. But I don't even believe that nothing can ever happen like this again. Like, I truly believe there's creators and people out there that can put together a project like that again. Is that ridiculous of me to think?
No, I think Dune is a perfect example of it. I think Dune is absolutely... Yeah, they didn't get everything they wanted to out of the gate, right? But he fought for an artistic vision. Not Denis Villeneuve. Fought for an artistic vision. Put it on screen. It stuck, and now we're getting the rest of it. That's kind of the way it works, right? Like, it's obviously not 3 movies filmed at the same time,
sure,
and all that stuff. It's not the same circumstances, but it's still possible.
Yeah, like, so I guess the point of this, and before I get too riled up, is that I
couldn't imagine you being more riled up. You were off.
Just like, I'm supposed to be defending this guy.
No, you're off the rails.
So I'm just saying, I'm gonna try and do that here. And the way, so
the defending part, you're defending the idea that something is untouchable.
No, because that's impossible. But I will try and defend that. Say the idea that no one will ever create a fantasy trilogy like Lord of the Rings ever again. In that, again, they caught lightning in the bottle. Okay. That there is no way that a studio is ever going to approve this stuff with basically a bunch of unknown actors. Aside from, they were pretty much unknown. Maybe Orlando Bloom was...
No, McKellen would be the big one.
And
Elijah. Elijah's and Sean Astin. Those two.
Sean Astin. What you would pick as the...
Goonies and Rudy and...
Yeah...
You know, it's not A-list stuff, but he's the known guy.
Okay, fair enough. But yeah, basically a crew of unknowns going to New Zealand, where, as far as I understand, not much had been filmed there. Basically, nothing had been filmed there at that point. Like, it was uncharted territory as far as film sets were concerned. Yeah. Like, no way is that anything ever going to happen like this again. Like. Okay. That's the best I can do.
That's the best you got?
That's the, and I understand that that's going to be pretty easily torn apart, but,
Well, it's tough, right? Again, we come into these bad Reddit takes with the idea to defend, but some of them are so egregious that you kind of just throw your hands up and you do the best you got.
Sure.
So if the idea is that you cannot compare anything to Lord of the Rings, I imagine that Amazon didn't spend $1 billion to not be compared to the original Lord of the Rings. I'm assuming there's a little bit of name value there. They want people to think of the original movies, to make this work.
Yeah,
because $1 billion for a TV show is asinine.
Yeah,
right. So the whole concept of it existing blows this dude's argument out of the water.
Well, so hold on. It actually might support this argument because they spent $1 billion to create this show. Now, granted, I think some of that was just on getting the rights, correct?
I have no idea.
Okay. But we're going to throw around the number $1 billion. We're going to use that as our touch point. But they spent $1 billion on this show. And as far as I'm concerned, the trailer looks like garbage. So if you spend $1 billion making something and you still can't reach the heights of what Peter Jackson basically did in his backyard with 6 dudes... Maybe it is untouchable. Maybe the first Lord of the Rings trilogy was blessed by God.
Who's God?
Any God.
I mean, man, that's tough. And it made tougher by the idea that I think they're writing new stuff, right? It's not, there's no Bible to go on or pre-existing stuff to draw from.
I love that we're using religious imagery.
I know. I said it and I was I wish I wouldn't have used that at all. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's harder. And so much of what we're saying looks bad is the CG, right? Is that what the CG doesn't look great.
Yeah, that's part of it. I think that it just doesn't even look or feel like Lord of the Rings. There's
a little. I mean, the first guy had it right. It's a little clean. It's a little fresh.
Yeah, yeah. It's too pretty.
But we're also
shiny.
But we're also talking like 2,000 years before the griminess, right? Maybe is that an argument?
No, I'm not letting that get over. No. Yeah. They still had grime for sure, because it doesn't even look like. It doesn't look shiny in the way that Rivendell looks shiny in those first movies. It looks shiny like I do not know what dust is. Like it looks like it couldn't really exist in the real world. And again, you spend $1 billion making something, and you can't make it look like something that Peter Jackson did in 2001 in his backyard. Ugh.
It's like you took a massive shot of those Rivendell house elves.
I'm just saying they did a great job.
You're not wrong. But I when we think of even when I think of like the Marvel shows, sometimes with what we always assume that Disney or studios like that have infinite money to just pump into these things, which they probably do. But at the end of the day, you still want to turn a profit. So you're only going to allocate X amount of dollars towards it. So $1 billion, sure. But I'd like to know what that breakdown is. I'm just saying.
Sure. But it's not going to actors. And that's not even to say that the actors
shitting on it. Everybody.
No.
That's amazing.
That's not to say the actors are bad.
No, I'm just saying it's nice because it's usually me.
I'm just saying they are unknown, and therefore they are not receiving the salary that other people are. Actually, Sean Bean might be the one with the most name recognition for the first one.
I still think it'd be McKellen.
Yeah, probably.
But
McKellen.
Bean's a good one.
Sean Bean's up there.
And John Rhys Davies, but he's a camouflaged character.
Oh yeah, he's a character actor. Yeah. But there's no way that they're I don't know, Chris Hemsworth can demand a particular salary now.
Sure.
And the random people they've picked for this Lord of the Rings show cannot they don't have that clout. So they aren't getting paid
So the whole cast is getting paid exactly what Chris Hemsworth would be getting paid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all in. Yeah. So I agree. I would love to see where that budget is going and what the breakdown is there. But and I think the other thing is where this guy is right, as far as I'm concerned. The first time I saw the Force Awakens trailer, it had been maybe 15 years, no, not quite that, or a little over a decade since we had a Star Wars film. You watch that trailer, it feels like Star Wars.
Sure,
it immediately you get that, you're in that world. That is not the case with this trailer. No. You watch it and you're not like, oh, this is Middle Earth.
Yeah.
And partially I think that goes to show how good a job the Star Wars team, like George Lucas way back when, and the current Star Wars team did in replicating those things and in creating a world that felt unique.
Yeah.
But I still think Middle Earth feels unique. And unique enough that they should be able to replicate that. And the fact that they just don't at all. Ugh.
Yeah, there's a couple of battle sequences or whatever like that, and none of it feels familiar.
Mm-hmm.
It does feel like a cookie cutter fantasy thing. It doesn't feel like I wouldn't be able to pick out any of the countries. Like I wouldn't know if it was Gondor or if it was anything like that.
Yeah,
it just didn't feel like any of that stuff.
Yeah.
When you look at the Jackson stuff, the elves are they're Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings elves.
Yeah.
They have a thing. And I know it's her because I was told it's her, but she doesn't exactly feel like Galadriel.
Yeah, oh, totally.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't really have a defense here.
So I just thought of something, and I do want to make it very, very clear. When I say it does not feel like Lord of the Rings, that has literally zero to do with the fact that this has black people in it. No, but that's an important point.
Absolutely.
I understand,
especially coming from you.
I just mean that there has been uproar about that, and there is issues with Peter Jackson's original trilogy, given the lack of representation, or the fact that all the people of color that were cast were the monsters.
Yeah.
There is problems.
There's a conversation
there. And absolutely, it is a big deal, and it's correct and right that Lord of the Rings is moving forward with people of color in different roles,
Yeah.
and that we have dwarves that are, not just white, and elves that are not just white. So it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with literally the world and the landscape. Not even counting the characters.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, if honestly, and you're right about that in terms of not feeling right. If you had played me that trailer, and at the end of it, you would be like, instead of the Rings of Power coming up, it'd just be like Wheel of Time. I would have bought it. Like,
Yeah.
it's just copy and paste. Well, at least it feels like. And I know we're taking 20 minutes out of our day to bag on a trailer, but trailers are important. We've talked about this before, right? It's a sink or swim situation, and if it's your first impression, and it's the first 2 minutes I get to see of it, and I'm not impressed, like I'm decidedly less excited about it.
Well, and frankly, they didn't need to release it.
No,
that's the big
they
thing,
could have
is
just
that
dropped it, and it would have been fine.
There was enough buzz because there was the Lord of the Rings show coming. So the fact that they released it when they did, there was probably. What, it got released in April, didn't it?
Something like that.
So like a solid 6 months before they were planning to actually drop the show.
And now they've released a sneak peek.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's on Amazon right now. It's like 2 minutes or something like that. It's like a sneak peek thing.
Have you seen this?
No, I didn't want to be extra disappointed.
Interesting.
Now I might.
But that's the thing, is that they are fully in control here. No one is demanding this, and they do not need to start the speculation cycle was fueling itself.
Yeah.
This is all they've done is cripple their marketing department, frankly, because now they're starting from zero or behind.
Yeah.
Instead of basically just being able to build off of just anticipation.
Yeah.
And then release something that looks correct.
Well, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you could have spent $1 billion, made this show, not shown a single thing, and rode off of the reputation and of those 3 movies.
Yeah.
And it would have been fine.
Yeah, it would have still been a hit.
So it would have been a hit. And people wouldn't know it was bad until 2 episodes in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Easily. Easily.
Right? So is there a definitive defense then? Do we have...
There's a defense in terms of I think they've done a bad job with this show, or at least with the marketing of this show. And there's a defense in terms of, the original Lord of the Rings trilogy is incredible, and based on what we've seen so far, appears to be untouchable, but only untouchable in terms of other Lord of the Rings properties.
Right.
So if we're comparing to the 2 other things, one of which hasn't even been released. Yeah, it's untouchable. But to imply that it is untouchable for all of movies is obviously ridiculous.
And we can't defend that at all. Do we try that?
No,
I don't know.
And I'm not even I don't even have an argument. There's nothing I can. No, idiot.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it. That's all.